What's harder, racing the Zwift Grand Prix or Zwift Racing League? I was able to do both as a points race on the Glasgow Crit circuit 1 week after the next, so I got a really good set of data to compare. Let me quickly explain. Zwift Grand Prix is like the top tier. Basically, it's an invite only thing for teams. So 16 of the best teams are selected. They have 5 riders each. So the field is 80 deep of the best riders on Zwift. The ZRL or Zwift Racing League is more community based. So anybody essentially can do it. You just have to be on a team. That team has to register. And then it's divided up by time zones. A lot of the Zwift Grand Prix riders and teams will do the ZRL as practice. So there's crossover in your competition. There's also a lot more people from the broader Zwift community who may not be discovered yet by a ZGP team. Maybe they can't commit to the ZGP because that does take a lot more commitment. The ZGP, you have to do performance verification, weigh-ins every time you race. So there's a lot of ways that they mitigate any chance that people could be like weight doping, whereas ZRL, obviously people could get away with fudging things a little or doing something else sneaky to enhance their performance. So there is that, which technically would make the ZRL harder. So let's see how they actually compare. So when racing, I'm always hooked up with my teammates through Discord so we can chat to each other, talk tactics and things while we're racing. 3, 2, 1, and off we go. So the top is ZRL, the bottom is the Grand Prix. So both were bad starts. I was not paying attention and had to wind up really quickly. But also I didn't realise how soon the first segment was. And you'd think I'd learnt from Zwift Grand Prix, which is the one I did first, by ZRL, that was going to happen. But I didn't, or at least I forgot and just wasn't paying attention yet again. So we're pushing super high watts here and it feels pretty heavy to start the race like this. But I just had to hold out for when it was going to sit up. So apologies, as you can see, the bottom one, which is the Grand Prix, is very stuttery. It was lagging, and that was a real life thing. That's not just the recording. So I did the race with the screen like this the whole time, and I know it's annoying, and I'm sorry. It was very annoying to race with this as well. It's the only time this has ever happened to me. So for the first lap, that was the first sprint that we just went through then, and I'm still catching up at this point. Like, we are so strung out here just because of how hard it was out of the gate. And everyone at the back is either maybe the less strong riders or just people that had a bad start, such as myself. So you do have to be strong enough to like stick in at this point. Most people can and most people do. But yeah, being at the back is not where you want to be, ever. So for this lap, I'm going to show the whole course. The others, I've cut it to just the sprints, but I wanted to show you what the entire course looks like so you have an understanding of how much recovery I'm getting between each of the sprints. And yeah. So the first sprint, which we just went through, was the flat one. And very soon we're going to come up to the one that's like a climb. We'll see how long it goes for, but yeah, it's still a sprint because of how short it is and the fact it's on Zwift, but it is up a hill, so lighter riders, you could say, have more of an advantage technically, in theory. So here it is, we've turned the corner and we're now on the second sprint. It's called the Clyde Kicker. It flattens off in the middle a bit here, and Mika, who's our expert, gave us some tips post Grand Prix race on how she does so well. Going hard through that middle section and just getting as much momentum as you can for the climb is sort of the trick there, if there is one. So up we go. Finally, I'm starting to catch up a bit, I feel. There's still that sort of front group that's formed, especially in Grand Prix, as you can see in the second video below. So I'm still off the pace and have some ground to cover. So now we're finishing the lap. It's a bit rollery up and down. So on the descents is where you can sort of catch up pretty easily. They often sit up as well. Everyone needs the recovery, so you generally get back in okay as long as you didn't drop too far on the climb, and the sprint is pretty much totally fine. The shorter, flatter sprint. For me at least. So all in all, this lap goes for about 4 minutes and 40 seconds. I'm already 3 minutes in, so it's almost over and we're back around to that first sprint again. And as you can see, I'm well and truly in the bunch now. However, my heart rate and watts are not even between the two races now. So my watts are still above that 250 mark in Grand Prix, but they're below 200 in ZRL. And the heart rate difference, as you can see, is like 171 in Grand Prix. That's pretty maxy for me, and it was down at 165 in ZRL. Now we're coming into that first sprint, champion sprint again. So Mika's tip is to push here. Going into the corner, you want to start pushing. So you're coming out with a bit of speed and moving through the pack. I had featherweight for both of these. Used it way too late in Grand Prix, which again is just a learning. And I'm pushing harder in ZRL, which would just be because I'm not as taxed. So here we go. 7th across the line for the ZRL sprint. Mika came first on that one. And nowhere to be seen in the Grand Prix. My watts were much higher in the sprint in ZRL. But you can see I'm still having a push in Grand Prix to stay in and catch up. On to lap 2, Clyde Kicker. So already pushing higher in Zwift Grand Prix. Aero Boost Power Up versus Featherweight Power Up. I'd say Featherweight is probably the better one to have here. And as you can see, it's doing me well in the ZRL. But my watts were lower for the start of the climb, and then I'm increasing and pushing and actually having a decent enough sprint at the end of the segment. Still with the Featherweight Power Up, probably pretty perfectly timed. So it was about 8th or 9th through the arch there in ZRL, and again, no result in Zwift Grand Prix. And have a look at those watts again. Below 100 for ZRL, 200 for Grand Prix. So my heart rate is remaining high, like 170 and above in the Grand Prix, which is not a happy place for my body. But the watts here, pretty similar doing this sprint. Both have aero boost, but I actually have sprint in my legs going above 600 watts. Second to Mika in the ZRL and a top 10 sprint in Grand Prix. Lap 3 climb, here we go again. So this one has pretty similar watts going into it, and for most of the climb both have drafting boost as well, and I used them at very similar times. So this one's a good one to compare. So this is lap 3. I've been doing a lot more work in Grand Prix between the sprints. The pace doesn't really ease off in Grand Prix like it does in the ZRL. And you can see the effect of that towards the end of this segment. My top end power, I've got more to give in ZRL, and I'm still pushing right to the banner, whereas I've pretty much given up in Grand Prix, but with good reason, because I'm not in contention for a placing in Grand Prix. It was a 7th for ZRL, no result for Grand Prix. Okay, champion sprint again. Now this is another good comparison. We both have aero power up in ZRL and Grand Prix. So let's see how we do. The heart rate's also the same going into it, 170 beats per minute. So we're pushing to the line, we've hit the aero boost. There's more people to draft off in Grand Prix, but as you can see, I'm pushing much higher watts now towards the end in the ZRL sprint, and I actually win it. So that is a first place for me in ZRL. I got a top 10 in Grand Prix. And on to lap 4 climb, already pushing really high watts in the Grand Prix. I've got the featherweight power up, which is good, and I'm already using it. I was about to say I should be using my aero boost in ZRL, but there it goes, which is probably good timing, just using it on the flat into the last bit of the climb. Pushing quite high watts in both, but Grand Prix eases off towards the top, while ZRL I continue to push, but this is very much because ZRL I'm there ready for a top 10, and Grand Prix I'm not in contention, so it makes sense to ease off. On this lap 4 champion sprint, we'll be able to compare the feather to the aero boost. Going in pretty similar, 169 beats per minute. I hit the aero boost maybe a tad too soon, but probably not really. I think I always leave things too late in my sprints on Zwift because I always have this momentum that carries through after the line. Which is probably wrong. So I get about, it's a second, I believe, through the ZRL line there, and no result in Grand Prix, and I've still got feather. This is the last lap going over the Clyde Kicker, and the watts are actually higher in Grand Prix on this one. We've got Aero in Grand Prix, Draft in the ZRL, and you can see I'm pushing higher watts in Grand Prix. So I think those sprints were starting to catch up with me in ZRL. Here we are coming across the line, and I'm way back in ZRL, which I hadn't been that far back that whole time, so I was definitely starting to finish line coming into now. So this is the lead in which I thought I would show. Grand Prix, the watts are still really high and the heart rates are pretty similar, but again higher in Grand Prix. So we're coming into that last corner where you want to be pushing. I had draft boost in ZRL and no power up in Grand Prix, which is very demoralizing. So I'm using my draft boost as best I can, and I'm pushing high watts, but I'm not really getting anywhere in ZRL or Grand Prix. So yeah, I was definitely taxed. I'd really maxed out during both of these races. And there you have it. So there's the final sprints. Pretty dismal on both accounts, but Mika won in ZRL. And then this is me in the most pain I've ever been in post-exercise. I did actually feel very sick at the start of the ZRL race, and yeah, the post-race hurt was the worst I've ever had. I was very incapable of moving. Okay, so now my favourite part, looking at my Training Peaks data. So both these races went for 20 minutes. My normalised power average was 288 watts for Zwift Grand Prix, 290 watts for ZRL, a 2 watt difference. Looking at my shorter power numbers, there's like 50 to 30 watts difference there in my max sprints between the two. My 5 minute, or like what I would consider sort of a VO2 max effort, the ZGP was 297 watts, ZRL is 281. It's the fact that I did a 16 watt higher 5 minute in ZGP goes to show how much I was working between the sprints, which would mean fatiguing me and would explain the lower sprint numbers that I had in the ZGP. My heart rate average for Zwift Grand Prix was 173 beats per minute. Average for ZRL, 169. So I had a lower heart rate in ZRL overall. Max was both 181 for each race, and lowest for Grand Prix was 159, lowest for ZRL was 153. I just was not getting as much rest between the sprints. Both had a 20-minute warm-up. Other things that could have affected the race is obviously nutrition, fatigue, all those sorts of things. Yeah. I don't know if there's much of a moral to this story besides racing on Zwift is freaking hard no matter what you're doing. Then Zwift Grand Prix obviously has all the best of the best in the one race. So I'd say Zwift Grand Prix is harder. That did reflect in my metrics. The ZRL, pushing yourself just as hard, you're just getting slightly better results. Just get out there, ride your bike and give it your all, 100% every single time. Can't go wrong. Have fun racing, like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.